That should be the slogan. Greenland, we're not it. we're asking. We're asking. It's consensual.
So
it's a consensual thing.
Bill Maher has completely lost the plot. We're going to talk about it.
And now for what I know you've all been waiting for, I'd like to give you my book report on my visit to the White House. Okay, as you know, 12 days ago I had dinner with President Trump, a dinner that was set up by my friend Kid Rock, because we share a belief that there's got to be something better than hurling insults from 3,000 miles away.
I don't know if Bill Maher is moving to the right so much as his ego is just getting him to move away from reality. He's this comedian who seems just so desperate that he's whitewashing years of Trump's behavior.
Grab him by the pussy.
Just to be able to brag about having dinner with the president and the guy who sang ba with a ba da bang, boogie, boogie, boogie said the jump, said up, jump the boogie. I was a big fan in middle school. In today's video, I'm going to analyze Maher's segment about his Trump dinner that he had on Real Time this past Friday. Maher keeps emphasizing that Trump was gracious and measured during their dinner.
Trump was gracious and measured, and why he isn't that in other settings, I don't know, and I can't answer, and it's not my place to answer.
But that doesn't say anything meaningful. You know, comedians will humanize people. They joke about it's part of the craft, but Maher isn't using this as a setup for a punchline. He's using it as a defense. And the problem is Trump's charm, whatever it may be, doesn't erase public history. He has a history of, you know, being pleasant and extremely unpleasant to people in intimate settings.
We went to Trump Towers and I remember waiting for him. He was the only guy who ever kept us waiting. Everyone else would be very punctual and I would hear him go, "You do this and that." He's screaming at someone and it becomes clear that he's screaming at Giuliani when Giuliani was mayor.
And that doesn't make him any less of who he is throughout the totality of his life. Maher kept talking about how Trump was willing to take a joke, which it's very rare. People will say again in private that Trump does not laugh a lot.
He doesn't seem like a guy who would handle a roast well. Tell us what happened.
It is odd. He loves being roasted. I've roasted him twice, actually. But he doesn't laugh.
Because it's almost like he loves being the center of it. He loves being the attention of being roasted, but he doesn't want to laugh at himself.
And I think that this was a very curated Trump, knowing that it was Bill Maher coming up to him. Trump has a history of making fun of Gold Star families and journalists.
Republican frontrunner at a rally in South Carolina this week, appearing to mock a journalist who is disabled.
And now the poor guy, you got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
That reporter, the New York Times' Serge Kovaleski, who has a chronic condition affecting his joints that limits flexibility in his arms.
And I don't think a small moment of humor undoes any of that. I think we should probably be judging political figures by their actions and not by their charm. You know, this is the guy who implemented the Muslim ban. This is the guy who instigated January 6th. It feels like Bill Maher is having this selective memory about what happened, you know, just focusing on this dinner, because hours after the dinner, Trump was back on Truth Social, pushing the same election lies that fueled the Capitol riot, and which Maher did not mention. His graciousness didn't stop him from lying or trying to overturn an election or promising to weaponize the DOJ against his enemies when he got back into power, which were seeing the beginnings of. Instead, it's completely focused on this one interaction as though this changes everything, and it changes nothing. I think the question is, why was Bill Maher so taken with him? Why is Maher so eager to highlight this version of Trump? Maher keeps insisting that he's just playing the centrist.
I'm not the leader of anything, except maybe a contingent of centrist-minded people.
But his version of centrism clearly has a tilt.
Told him he was wrong when he tweeted the night before that I was critical of all things Trump. Not true. Check the tapes. Moving Israel's embassy to Jerusalem, loved it. The border did need to be controlled. I'm glad the cops are getting their morale back. DEI had gone too far. Biological men shouldn't be playing women's sports. Europe should pay for their defense. And of course, it makes sense that Arab countries should take in Arab refugees, like the million Syrians who wound up in Germany when Saudi Arabia took none. He said to me, "You're right, they took none."
Comedians will often play devil's advocate for a bit. It's part of the shtick, but Maher isn't joking when he platforms bad faith arguments. If you look at how he talks about Israel, and criticism of Israeli policy isn't inherently anti-Semitic, but Bill Maher treats it as such. He frames it like any kind of pushback on Israel is some sort of radical leftist position. We're talking about genocide here. And even if you're not going to use that word, pointing out civilian casualties in Gaza is not the same thing as endorsing Hamas. He's not being politically neutral. He's clearly picking a side here and dressing it up in the cloak of centrism. Also, his both sides approach falls apart when you look at who he chooses to criticize. He spends way more time ranting about trans issues than addressing healthcare cost or wage stagnation. It feels like the American people don't really care about trans athletes so much as they do about being able to pay rent. And instead, Bill Maher keeps harping on wokeism. And yeah, it just feels like this is playing into the right-wing playbook. It's their focus on culture wars instead of, looking at billionaires and corporations who are bleeding people dry. It's also worth noting that we don't have like an institutional left in the United States. Again, Bernie Sanders is not considered a leftist in most other Western countries. He's considered a centrist. Even Bill Maher's foreign policy takes are getting into weird territory. His whole rant about the EU defense spending sounded something like Tucker Carlson would be saying, basically painting Europe as these freeloaders and ignoring how much the U.S. benefits from NATO, not just in terms of military strategy, but economically. So what's really going on here? Is Bill Maher shifting ideologically, or is this something more about his ego?
And he mostly steered the conversation to, what do you think about this?
My personal biggest issue with Bill Maher, beyond his insanely dated comedy, is that he's not about the laughs. He wants to be viewed as the smartest guy in the room.
At dinner, he was asking me about the nuclear situation in Iran in a very genuine, hey, I think you're a smart guy, I want your opinion sort of way.
And you can see it how he interacts with guests, how he frames debates, and particularly how he reacts to criticism. Please look at the amazing Kyle Dunnigan impression of Bill Maher.
I would like to take this minute to explain to Zillennials what being an adult is.
And look at Bill Maher's reaction to it. Bill Maher ended up dismissing that impression as being hack and of the 90s, when Bill Maher is still making references like to Cindy Crawford and The Godfather, and the exceptionally dated dude. I want to stop here and say that as a general rule in any kind of a public sphere, whatever, like, I don't want to be criticizing other comedians. I like to give comedians the benefit of the doubt. I have been, since I was a teenager or whatever, a very big Bill Maher fan. I put in my Facebook, yes, I'm old, Facebook, or religious beliefs or political beliefs. This is like back in 2008 or 9 when like Religulous had come out, Bill Maher's movie. That my political beliefs were Bill Maher. And I think that was true at the time. But as I've evolved and grown up, and as I've evolved as a comedian, again, it's become very apparent to me that Bill Maher is not so concerned with being funny as he is being the smartest person in the room. And because he likes to play in the political sphere, I'm holding him to a different standard than a comedian, because comedians will always say, oh, I'm just making jokes. But that's not what Bill Maher is trying to do. Bill Maher is trying to be perceived as the smartest person in the room and a player in the political arena. And I mean, he is essentially a political pundit. So, yeah, and he's increasingly sucked over the years. So, like, I'm sorry, he's not immune from criticism. This is not an endorsement, but these are the best tasting sugar-free, fake sugar, whatever, protein bars. You do feel like you're going to have some sort of growth in your body that's not natural after eating a decent amount of these. But on the short term, they're the best. So when Kyle Dunnigan's poking fun at him, it feels like it's a challenge to his status.
It's amazing that you're like with him for a whole vacation, just picking up his mannerisms, and he doesn't know.
He was so mean to me on this trip. And even my girlfriend, I was like, he's being mean to you, right? I go, yeah, I don't. And I was very kowtowy and quiet.
But when someone like Trump is gracious, it validates his sense of importance. Again, it's now about Bill Maher's ego. This isn't new for Maher. Norm Macdonald, the greatest, once said, Bill's not really a comedian. He's more of a satirist. And Maher's visible annoyance spoke volumes.
Interesting thing. Some comedians, Larry, I feel, a comedian, what he should be doing is being funny. That should be his goal, to be funny. I feel some comedians, their goal is to be smart. And the funny is like a collateral thing. They want to be seen as smart. Your friend Bill Maher, for instance, you know, he wants to be seen as an intellectual.
Dennis Miller.
Nobody likes a guy smarter than them. That's the worst guy you can be. A guy smarter than the audience. They're going to hate you. You know?
Norm was pointing out that Maher cared more about making points than making people laugh. And that tension has always been there, but it's absolutely worsened over time with Bill Maher. And he'll always go for being perceived as the smartest person in the room over being the funniest person in the room. And I don't know that he's capable of either. I feel like he's not particularly respected amongst comedians for being funny, and he's not politically savvy enough to be respected by political wonks, right? It's like, I guess he's funnier than your average person in the US, and he's more politically savvy than your average person in the US. But he's not particularly an expert in either one of those things. So the Trump dinner makes sense in that context because Bill's like craving validation from those that he sees as his equals or better. And the problem is when you need that kind of validation, you'll excuse anyone who gives it, even if it's Trump.
He's much more self-aware than he lets on in public.
Let's do a Hitler comparison. I'm sure Hitler was great to throw some beers back with. You know, I don't know. Hitler might not have drank. But my point is, who the fuck cares if that's what Hitler was like? Because we know what the other stuff that Hitler did is. Democracies don't just fall overnight, although it feels like they're trying. They erode slowly over time. And again, this is just another step towards that. It's making it easier for the public to dismiss Trump and this administration as a threat.
A crazy person doesn't live in the White House. A person who plays a crazy person on TV a lot lives there, which I know is fucked up. It's just not as fucked up as I thought it was.
Bill Maher has always been kind of a political comedian. He's always tried to walk this line between comedy and political commentary. I don't feel, again, like he does either one very well. He's not respected by comedians. He's not a comics comic. You don't hear younger stand-ups citing him as an influence, and he's not taken seriously by political operatives of some kind of a policy wonk. He's kind of this strange hybrid, you know, he's like a guy who uses his comedy platform to chase political relevance while using his political takes to feed his own ego. Speaking of which, I don't have particular insider knowledge of this, but, you know, I've read through some Reddit threads. Bill Maher, again, his ego is so sensitive, and we think the internet thinks it's either the warm-up comic or one of his producers or whatever, but he has a guy in his audience who every show goes, woo, woo. Anytime Bill Maher says a joke or makes like some sort of political point, the guy's there every show, so he's clearly a plant. And I don't know if they have applause signs or whatever in the audience there, and if somebody doesn't laugh at his joke, he'll blame the audience on being too sensitive. It's like, you know, yeah, or them not getting it. It's like, or maybe they didn't find it funny. Is that ever in the realm of possibility, Bill, that the audience didn't find something you said funny? To be clear, I'm all for breaking bread and reaching across the aisle and hearing people's viewpoints that aren't your own, but I'm not talking about going to have a donut and some coffee with a Trump voter. We're talking about Trump himself, and I think it's completely naive for Bill Maher to think that Trump is somehow going to change his ways. His entire life, his entire history is of being a overly sensitive narcissist who's willing to lie and cheat and abuse and destroy others to further his own value, his own ego, his own place in life. And to think that all that Trump needed was someone to reach across the aisle and break bread with him is not only stupid on Bill Maher's part and completely ignoring the history of who Trump is. It's not only dangerous on Bill Maher's part, but again, it shows you how egotistical Bill Maher is to think that he's going to be the one to somehow change this, that nobody else, none of the other exceptionally intelligent people that previously in the last Trump administration, Trump had been surrounded with, who warned about Trump, who tried to put up barriers to stop him from doing this, who, but ostensibly on the outside were on his side. None of them could break through to Trump, but it's going to be Bill Maher reaching across the aisle. It's like, no, dude, this guy genuinely is not a good person. Existential threat to democracy, probably. A piece of shit, definitely. So what are we doing here?
Your boy gave me nothing, just hats. Hats and a very generous amount of time and a willingness to listen and accept me as a possible friend, even though I'm not MAGA, which was the point of the dinner.
He talked about this. He wanted to be his father, to be proud of him for being invited to the White House to have dinner with the United States president, regardless of the fact that it was Trump. That was more important. And he wanted a pat on the back, a round of applause for, people to be proud that he was invited.
So yes, I will talk to anybody.
Yeah.
And it's an honor to be invited to the White House under any circumstances.
Absolutely.
So,
also, it allows you to have a platform with him where you can tell him the things you disagree with. Like
I think it's
somebody was saying that to me.
It's generous.
I still enjoy the conversations that they have on his show, but on the same show, he had Steve Bannon on, he had Piers Morgan. Steve Bannon, again, what are we doing here? It feels like a problem with people who used to be, liberal or leftist, whatever you want to call it, progressive, is when they've been rejected by their side, they're now kind of embracing these gaps that they can fill on the right and being embraced by them, because these people aren't so much about their principles as they are about having their ego massaged. I don't know. What do you think? Look at my awesome comedy commentary podcast. I know it's getting political, but those two things are mixing a lot from Bill Burr to Bill Maher now. Please follow me at Eric Berry Comedy. Let me know what you think in the comments. And I don't have money to buy a desk or a better camera setup. I apologize, but if you have any recommendations, let me know. Hey, I'm going to Edinburgh, Scotland for the Fringe Festival with the show. Are you over there? Are you going to be over there? Do you have any recommendations, any advice? I'm going to try to document that too. Let me know. Until next week, thank you. Bye.
At one point, I said to him, "You're scaring people. Do you really want to be scaring your own citizens so much?" I know now you're all saying, "And what did he say to that?" Honestly, I don't remember.